What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. So today we are taking a look at Spitfire chamber strings, an absolute classic, and one I'm sharing now because I just recently got my hand on this core version. For a few months, I've had the Essentials version when Spitfire released it, but when core was on the website and even professional, right, with all the mic positions and stuff, I was thinking it would be so nice to have the core version. I honestly don't need the full version, as I don't think most of us do. The core version provides plenty of mic positioning options already. The close and far is a really nice touch, I think. And the articulations it comes with, in my opinion at least, is more than enough for most composers' utility. So today, let's kind of take a look at the library. Let's hear the patches. Let's hear what it's all about. And if you don't already have the library, you can find it down below in the description if you want to check it out. And I have added this library as well to my sample library buyer's guide. So if you want to check that out as well and see all my personal recommendations, everything I use on a regular basis, then you can grab that for free as well in the description box below as a gift for watching this video today. So with that being said, let's kind of dive into Spitfire chamber strings. So I think a lot of people wouldn't hesitate to say this is their favorite string library in terms of chamber strings that they own. And it's one of the oldest ones, I believe, on the market, but it still holds up very well to this day. The big reason I wanted to upgrade from Essentials is because I wanted the additional flexibility with the articulations plus the different legato types. As you might know, I'm a big sucker for legato, especially string and woodwind brass legato. So let's have a listen to the Violins one first. As you can see here, the folder structure is actually quite simple at the highest level, on surface level. So you can see there's just the individual sections that you see, plus the ensembles patch. But if you go into the advanced folder, you have other things, extended techniques, all the individual articulations listed out for the sections, different legato techniques, performative and decorative, which we'll take a look at. Some other patches as well, which are more of sort of to make it easier on your CPU, and then performance legato, which we'll hear a little bit of as well. So a lot of depth, as you can see, but let's start with the Violins one legato and then go through the different core articulations that it offers. And there we go, a very simple GUI, and I love the overall sound. I think for me, the biggest thing that attracted me to these chamber strings in general was the overall detail of sound, and the blend between the close mics and the far mics is really as close to perfect as I can get to my ears, at least. For me, symphonic strings, or the symphony orchestra, I should say, is a little bit further away. Like you definitely hear the larger size of the ensemble and the way Air Studios responds to all the instruments playing. It can get a little bit overwhelming in my opinion, but with chamber strings, it really hits that balance between close, detail, and far room sound. So I think it has a really great premix to begin with. The legato is also pretty good. Like you can still hear some of the transitions. It does hold up decently well, but I think it's good enough where in a fuller context, you wouldn't really notice too much that these are MIDI strings. Especially when you hold an individual sample for the sustains, you really hear the vibrato, the passion that goes into the samples. All the performances are very musical, and that's another thing I really like about this library. It's a very musical, natural sounding library to my ears. So let's move on to Violins 2, and let's go through these a little bit quicker, starting with the legato as well. Yeah, so just like Violins 1, a very clear, pure sound. If anything, the Violins 2 sounds slightly thinner compared to Violins 1. Different players, I'm sure, right? And different performances, different samples for sure. So yeah, just a nice different aesthetic compared to the Violins 1. Gives us a little more flexibility there. One thing I did forget to mention is that I do feel like the legato suits like moderately paced lines the best. If you have really slow lyrical lines and you want the occasional portamento, you're going to find that more in the advanced or the legato technique specifically. So there's different types of legato they've recorded for these sections as well, which is really cool to see. But I believe in these chord patches that you load right out of the box, these ones here, you get one legato style. Maybe it's a little bit impacted by the velocity you play or the speed that you play, but I do think having the dedicated legato patches for specific instances during your performance is a good way to go for those. Let's move on to the violas here. Very cool. And I think for the violas, there are a bit more obvious legato transitions where you can hear the samples kind of being taped together. So I do think the Violins 1 and 2 perform a little bit better in terms of melodic lines and it being a little bit smoother. But still, I think the violas have a nice woody sound to it, as you would come to expect from these instruments. And the fact that there are so few players allows you to really hear the detail in the sound, which really isn't the case in a lot of larger ensembles, right? Symphonic sizes. You wouldn't really expect to hear as much detail there. As well, you would come to expect, the mod wheel is mapped to dynamic layers and how loud the patch is. You get the vibrato. Of course, you can assign that to really any parameter you want, but I do like the default setting. It doesn't feel overbearing or not at all. And then there's also the legato interval speed, which is kind of cool. So you could actually speed up the legato transitions manually if you wanted to. And then overall expression, I believe, is just the overall dynamic range, if I'm not mistaken. So, but to be honest, 9 times out of 10, I'm only touching the dynamics, the mod wheel. It's a little glitchy, as you can see. So my computer's a little, or my MIDI controller is getting a little older in years, but that's the cool thing too. When you're working with equipment that might not be 100%, you can always record in the line, but you can always massage it afterwards, which is part of the process, right? It's part of the editing, and it makes the whole thing so much more fun because you're getting really granular and you're getting really deep into the editing process, which is kind of cool. Seeing the whole mockup come together. Okay, let's hear the cellos now. Cool. All right, so the cellos, however you want to say it, they definitely have some meaty low end to it, actually. Like a lot of cello libraries, I feel like they kind of rounded the low end a little bit, so the whole library feels a bit brighter. But these cellos specifically, they definitely have that resonant low quality. So if it's a little bit overbearing for you, you can always EQ it out. I think it's arrangement, like it's contextually due to the arrangement, though. Like depending on how much other stuff you have in there. If other stuff has a lot of low end, it would make sense to cut out, the unnecessary low end for some of the strings, for example. Completely up to you. All right, then we have the double basses to round things out. Right, so a very gritty sound, and again, a lot of low end there. So yeah, the violins definitely do have a lot of high end as well. Like that sparkle is definitely there in the samples and the fidelity. So you get a very well-rounded range of frequencies. Actually, you get highs, you get the mids with the violas, and then you get lots of lows as well with the cello and basses. So nice, well-rounded approach there. And now let's have a quick listen to the ensemble patch. So that would be this one here at the bottom. Basically, it's just everything, no legato, but if you want a mix of all the different strings in one patch, you get that here. Great for sketching purposes. So. Yeah, lots of dynamic range in this patch. And just a beautiful response from Air as well, Air Studios. Like you can really hear the natural reverberance of the sound off the hull. So that's kind of cool too. All right, let's kind of move into the advanced folder just a little bit here. Again, we have extended techniques. individual articulations, legato techniques, other patches, and performance legato. But let's start with the extended techniques here just a little bit. So you have the core techniques split out from these extended ones. The core ones, the majority we've kind of already heard in the individual sections, but let me just play a few of these here. So. Right, so there we go. So it's a combination of some familiar techniques along with some other ones. The flotando, sopant, like these are very, very clearly heard in these patches. There's just so much detail included here. I especially like the spiccato feather there. It's a very light sort of touch. And then the staccato dig is so cool. As is the mercato attack. That's like the strongest attack I've ever heard, or I've heard so far, at least in this library. Now we have the decorative techniques, which go a little bit beyond, I guess. Let's take a look at a few of these here. So anything with the mute concertino is going to sound a little thinner by default, and then if you add the sopant on top of that, it just adds so much more, not airiness, but like thinness to it. You know, it's kind of cool. Okay, so they've got a lot of these effects that I haven't even actually explored before, but it's really cool that you have so much variety. You got those disco falls, classic, the runs, and the slides. These measure tremolos are tempo synced, and they have trills up to minor third and perfect fourth. Like that's even more flexibility, right? So you can see like for 99% of cases, you probably have enough here at your disposal to play around with. It's pretty cool. You can tell there's definitely that film scoring or media scoring tone to it in this library, especially with those effects there. Okay, then we move on to the legato techniques here. So each section comes with a legato decorative patch and a legato performance patch. Let's have a listen to the cellos here in this case, and let's hear the legato performance first. All right, so you can see this patch has an adaptive approach to it, right? Depending on the velocity you play and also the speed you play, it kind of triggers between these different legato articulations. By default, it starts on fingered. If you play lightly, it's going to go with fingered. If you play a little harder, it goes to bowed legato. And then for portamento, you can activate that with a very light touch. So from one note to the very next note, if you play very lightly, you trigger the portamento, and then play fast, you get the runs. If the notes are really close together, you also get the legato runs transitions there as well. So 5 different legato types you can play around with. That's the flexibility that they're offering here. Pretty cool stuff. Now this is also a really cool draw to the library. Legato using these different articulations here with the mute, with flotando, sol strings, right? Legato tremolo. Let's have a listen. All right, and then let's have a listen to the performance legato finally. So if you take a look here, each section has their own performance legato patch, kind of similar to the performance legato here, but it's all kind of just built into the one patch. Plus you have the shorts as well built into it. So if you play very short, they kind of trigger a sort of like a spiccato sample, and then you continue playing, you get the legato. So let's start with the violas here. Right, so I think the performance legato patches would serve sketching really, really well because you get the combination of shorts and longs, legatos. So if you really want to get your ideas out very, very fast, and then later you can expand into the individual articulations, maybe have legato on one track and then have these spiccatos or shorts on another track, so you can really dial in the exact amount of attack you want on maybe some individual sustain notes, then that gives you the flexibility there. But just to sort of have a lot in one patch, these performance legato patches are a great place to start. So that is a quick look at Spitfire Chamber Strings Core. Again, is it necessary to get the Pro version for most of us? Honestly, I don't think so, because I think the Pro version mainly expands upon the mic positions, maybe gives you a few more articulations and stuff, but most of what you will ever need, honestly, can be located within the core library. A big other reason I prefer the core version is just because the space, the amount of space it takes up on your drive is only around like 70-80 gigabytes, which yes, it's a lot, but compared to some other ones, Pro versions, let's say 300-400 gigabytes, you really don't need that much, right? And we all have limited amounts of storage space. So I upgraded from Essentials. I definitely think this is worth the upgrade if you want the full version of Spitfire Chamber Strings and you want it to cover at least 90% of what you would need it for. I think it covers it very, very well. So, but let me know your thoughts. Like, do you think if you have other chamber strings libraries, or even if you don't, from ones that you've heard on the market, do you think this is still the best? Or do you think it's at least like, let's say top 5, top 10? Or do you think maybe it's not the right aesthetic for you? Is it too wet? Is there too much of the Air Studio sound in there? Let me know down below. And again, if you do want to check out like what other libraries I would recommend, you know, the other libraries I've included in my sample library buyer's guide, then you can get that in the description box below. Again, it's completely free if you want to check that out. It goes like beyond just strings, right? There's also winds and brass and percussion and stuff and pianos and jazz libraries and basically everything I would personally recommend. If someone was to ask me, Chris, what library would you use for this or this or this? I kind of put that all into the one guide. And if you do want to check out this library for yourself, it's also down below there in the description. And if you do use that link to purchase the library, then you will be supporting me in a small way as well, which is, of course, greatly appreciated. But of course, there's no obligation. If you don't want to do so, totally fine. But that option is there as well. And if you want to check that out, it's in the description too. But yeah, I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next video, and I'll see you very, very soon. Take care.